And joining us now, he's a reporter for ThinkProgress, Scott Keyes, and we're going to discuss this his latest for ThinkProgress. It's a really great investigative report into Shawnee, Oklahoma, which Scott calls the worst city in America to be homeless. And he's going to tell us why. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, guys.
Thanks for coming on. So Scott, first of all, this is really, I encourage everyone to go to Think Progress and read this. It's called Welcome to Shawnee, Oklahoma, the worst city in America to be homeless, because it is a real deep dive into this city, which you're going to tell us why you're calling it the worst city in America to be homeless. So let's just start with that. What's going on in Shawnee?
Yeah, so, I don't use that term lightly because homelessness is an issue that I've been covering for a while now and writing on different policies, in Tampa or Palo Alto or Miami, all across the country. So I've seen a lot of policies that are really vindictive towards homeless people. But what I encountered in just researching and digging into what's been going on in Shawnee, without a question, just takes the cake. There's no city that comes close to Shawnee in terms of the number and the comprehensive nature of the new kind of regulations that they passed to target their homeless population and criminalize their essentially their existence. I'll start at the beginning because it's a bit of a complex story, but what happened essentially is Shawnee, Oklahoma is a small city about 45 minutes from Oklahoma City, and it's got about 30,000 folks, and it's fairly poor, but even though it's a majority white city, a plurality of the homeless population is Native American. They've got about double the national rate of homeless people in Shawnee, double the rate in the country as a whole. And the wintertime in Oklahoma sometimes it's fine, but sometimes it can get really, really cold. And so there's obviously a real need for shelter when it does start snowing, when the temperatures dip below. But right now there's really only one shelter in the city, a Salvation Army, that only has a few dozen beds, even though there are somewhere between 100 and 125 homeless people in Shawnee itself. So fast forward to January 2011, there's a local homeless nonprofit that had won a major grant. We're talking $450,000 to renovate their facilities and turn them into an overnight shelter. It was great. It was all paid for. All that they had to do was to get permission from the city commission to get their building rezoned. They thought it was just going to be a basically just rubber stamping it because, why not? It wasn't going to cost the city a dime, all fully paid for and everything. Well, the vice mayor, who's the head of the city commission, James Herod, looked at it and realized that he and his wife own a lot of rental property nearby. And all of a sudden, their main concern is less the, homeless people who are cold in the winter and more how will this affect my property value? This is a public official here voting on it. And so then this ends up
I'm sure
leading...
the city as a whole really cared about his property value, and that's why he cared about it.
Right. Well, and so he, his wife ended up writing a letter to the city commission, his daughter, his son-in-law, et cetera. They all ended up writing a lot of letters and kind of driving up opposition to this. Even though the town as a whole, the testimony in the letters, people were overwhelmingly in favor, they led a bit of an insurrection on the city commission, ended up convincing them to vote a 6-1 against the rezoning request. And so the shelter the homeless nonprofit ended up having to forfeit the entire $450,000. They couldn't build the shelter just because they couldn't get the facility rezoned. And that, and they didn't even stop there. The commissioner, James Herod, ended up then successfully pushing for a moratorium on building any new shelters in town. just like throw another kind of wrench in the works and make sure that nothing could happen on this front. That's where it started, with this would-be homeless shelter getting blocked. But that's not where actually the story ended with homelessness in Shawnee. This ended up leading to, there was right around this time, there was an effort to kind of beautify the downtown and revitalize the downtown district, which even in the report ended up basically singling out homeless people, saying that, referring to them as the problem, and saying that these are, this is something that we need to fix, essentially. And so what that led to was pretty soon these new regulations ended up coming out from the park department, and new rules where they did everything from shutting off the water and the electricity in the parks because they didn't want homeless people to use them. Remember, these are public goods, and they're for everybody, but they decided they didn't want certain people using these public goods. Taking out park benches because at night some homeless people were sleeping on them instead of sleeping on the cold ground. So they took out these park benches and wanted to put back new ones that had the bar in the middle, so nobody could lie down on them. Stopping handing out permits to charity groups that wanted to hand out food in the park, not giving them permission anymore to do that. And then what happened?
That's just it really gets to a point where just one thing after another, and then to me the real cherry on top, I guess you can say, is the actively stopping others who want to help the homeless. It's
right.
Really
we call this
stunning.
we call this the criminalization of homelessness. Like homeless people, just like everybody else, need to sleep. They need to use the bathroom. They need to try to find somewhere to eat, etc. And so these types of policies, it's not designed to help them. It's not designed to help them better their situation. It's designed to criminalize the behaviors that they have to engage in to survive. What ended up happening, though, it wasn't just the city officials that ended up going on this front. There was also essentially a quasi-vigilante group that sprung up. They started acting under the auspices of a beautification campaign, but what this really amounted to was
they love that word, beautification, as if the homeless is some sort of blight on the city. I mean,
exactly.
Unbelievable how they use the language. It's continue. I'm sorry.
That's right. Well, and so what this group ended up doing was going around, and anytime they found evidence of homeless people, whether they saw a tent or an old mattress or backpack or some sort of possessions where folks have been living in the woods or something, they would just bring out the wood chipper and throw it in. They didn't, if they ever found people, sometimes they would find people with the stuff, and they would give them they would tell them, you've got a few days to pack up and move out. We're going to come back in 72 hours. If anything's still here, we're going to throw this in the wood chipper. These people, these aren't people who are like camped out on this group's land. These are people who are hanging out on public land. These are, either public parks or museums or anywhere where they're allowed to, they have just as much right as anybody else to be there.
So who are these people to even have to say in anything? Yeah.
Right. Well, but this group essentially took it upon itself to say, we don't think those people deserve to be there, and so we're going to do something about it. They claim that most of the stuff that we were throwing in the wood chipper was abandoned or old and crusty stuff, but let's remember that's also making a lot of assumptions about just because you find it an old mattress doesn't mean that there's not somebody who's been sleeping on that.
Of course, because someone who's homeless would have a brand new mattress just waiting outside for them.
Right, exactly. And the wild thing about this as well was that this wasn't some group who was uh, uh, doing a like fly by night campaign. They're, which is why I say that they're not. It wouldn't be exactly right to call them a vigilante group because it's their operations weren't just. It's not like they were being ignored by city officials. They were actually being actively celebrated. We found a thank you note written from the mayor to this group, thanking them for, handwritten, effusive, saying, um, I've got the in front of me for all. Thank you. I okay. The two words "thank you" cannot express enough to you for the wonderful things you're doing for the city. You and your friends are truly making a difference. And it's just, I think this is reflective of an attitude that I found in the city of trying to create more of an atmosphere, less of helping people who are down on their luck and more of creating the atmosphere of self-deportation, trying to make life as cruel and miserable as possible that they'll go, leave town, go live somewhere else. Even though, a lot of people who are in an unfortunate situation living in the woods or the park or wherever are from Shawnee or from the area. This is their home, even if they're not wealthy enough to be able to afford a house right now. And the city and a lot of people in it are trying to, have been trying to create an atmosphere where they of trying to push them out of town.
I just pulled up that letter you were reading, and I'm sorry, I just have to continue a little bit. It goes on to wish the leader of that vigilante group, again, this is from the mayor, a Merry Christmas. I mean, really, just my God, like,
A healthy and prosperous new year.
yeah, jeez. But you mentioned how a lot of these homeless people have been long time, residents of Shawnee. Was Shawnee hit particularly hard by like a closing of a factory or the 2008 financial crisis? Is there something that is this a long-standing homelessness problem in Shawnee, or are these
Shawnee, and is reflective of Oklahoma in general in a lot of ways. Obviously with the history of it originally being settled by Native Americans who were kicked off their land out east in the middle of the 19th century, given this land for a couple of decades, and then all of a sudden, white prospectors coming in and deciding, oh, it's some pretty nice land you've got there. Maybe we should, it's looking pretty good. Maybe we should settle it ourselves. And so a lot of it's been a fairly, a relatively poor area for a while, but a lot of that is also reflected in, is wrapped up in this sort of race and history of the city in general. Like I mentioned, I think it's 77% white, the city itself, but most of the homeless folks in town are Native American, and so it's hard to kind of untangle the history of how Native Americans have been treated in the area from the present day fact that they still are lacking the same opportunities and the same outcomes that white people have been enjoying.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just like you mentioned at the top, that you've covered cities who deploy these, I guess, beautification tactics. You mentioned in your piece how Tampa banned people from sleeping in public areas. Palo Alto criminalized sleeping in cars. There's cities that have banned church volunteers to feed the homeless in public areas. There's cities who actively seek out to corral homeless people and then just basically bus them to another city so it's not their problem. To hear that there's a city out there that combines all of this is I don't know if I should say scary from just that perspective, or scary that there's so many cities employing tactics that you can find in this one city. I mean, it really
right.
is.
That's exactly right.
So what has anything come out of this? Are there people in Shawnee or in Oklahoma in general who are actively working, whether it be on the ground or or lawmakers who were trying to bring about some sort of change to what's going on in Shawnee, or as you said,
No,
Oklahoma as a whole?
yeah, it's a tough thing because at the same time, it's mostly a local zoning issue, at least as it relates to the shelter that was fully funded and about to be built, but then nixed at the last minute. And I interviewed the city commissioner, James Herod, who he and his wife own millions of dollars in rental property in town, and were worried about their property value. He says he told me that they're quote unquote working on a sort of uniform standard that would end up lifting the moratorium, but it seemed pretty clear that there wasn't any imminence to it, that it wasn't a priority, and B, that who knows what these standards will end up being, and C, the fact that they're so that they were this vehement and jazzed up against essentially the best of situations. You had a shelter, a homeless shelter for free, that was all staffed, all paid for, and everything that the town wanted, that people were, testifying and writing letters, all, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 in favor of, and that they would reject it in those circumstances, I think gives you an indication that it's not going. I would be very surprised to see them reverse course anytime soon.
Mm.
Now that having been said, who knows whether or not enough pressure can be put on them, either from local uproar or state officials on down the line. But it doesn't seem like something that's going to end up changing overnight, unfortunately.
This city commissioner seems like a real great guy, doesn't he? I mean, I'm just reading through this, reading through the piece. You just reminded me when you brought up the letters from the public who were in favor of it, and how in your piece you state how the majority of the letters that were against it were all from this guy's family, as if he corralled them and said, "Hey, I need you to all do me a favor and write these letters." I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah. Well, and the odd thing was that one of the primary letters opposed to the shelter was from Commissioner Herod's wife, saying that recently my tenants have moved out due to fears of not feeling safe and secure in their homes, that we're going to have trouble renting these. But when I interviewed the Commissioner Herod, he told me that the building right now, where they're already hand out, have a soup kitchen and a food pantry, that it hasn't had any impact on their ability to rent properties. B, and this is a direct quote, it's not bothered the rental property at all. They're rented and they've never not been rented. And C, he says he claimed that they don't even care about the value of the rental property because they're not planning on selling or anything, and so it doesn't matter. It would, essentially completely undercutting all of his wife's claims in the letter that she had sent to the city commission, which played a part in the commission ultimately rejecting the rezoning request. And take away from that what you will. What do you believe, Commissioner Herod, or do you believe his wife, or is he just trying to, change the story now that they've already kind of emerged victorious? Yeah, who knows?
I mean, with the history of Oklahoma in general and of Shawnee that you that we know, and the majority of these homeless, like you stated, being Native Americans who were displaced from their land. It's just the irony in their letters and their actions of these rich white people coming in and again kicking these people off this public land, this land that's supposedly for everybody. It really is.
That's a great point.
It's stunning.
That's a great point, and it's not, and one other point that I want to make clear here is this isn't just it's also not just an academic discussion about who should be on which land. This is for some people, this ends actually as life and death. I mean, I mentioned the story about a man named Gary Lynn Roy, who, he had a pretty rough life. He was a Native American, had been trying to combat alcoholism, was on the up and up, and had been working construction, ended up having an accident on the job, fell through a roof, broke both his legs, and so he was homeless, sleeping outside by the railroad tracks, 12 blocks from where this shelter was supposed to be. This is last February, and then a big storm hit, and he ended up freezing to death. Just 6 inches of snow. He didn't live because he didn't have a house to be in. He didn't have somewhere warm to be. And this is like almost within sight of where there was supposed to be a homeless shelter where he could have stayed had it not been for, the actions of the city commission.
Jeez. It really is. It really is stunning, and it's a great piece. I urge all of our listeners to go to thinkprogress.org and read it. It's called "Welcome to Shawnee, Oklahoma, the worst city in America to be homeless." Scott Keyes, senior reporter for Think Progress. Thank you so much for coming on the show and discussing this with us.
Great to chat with you. Thanks so much.